But what happened to the Afghan interpreters when the French left at the end of 2012? Not many have found refuge in France. Just 73 of the 258 who applied for visas. Most of the rest are in hiding, threatened with death by the Taliban for collaborating with the enemy. But following legal pressure, the French authorities have agreed to re-examine their applications. For these men who still dream of moving to France, it is their last hope.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
A shake-up in Greece's ruling party. Syriza's far-left faction breaks away as a new group following the prime minister's resignation. Troops in Macedonia fire stun grenades at migrants on the border. This as Germany slams Europe's failure to tackle the worsening crisis. And feeling the heat, July was the planet's warmest month on record, smashing old levels. The data backing up environmentalists' fears about global warming. Those are the top stories this hour. Thanks for joining us. I'm Molly Hall. We begin with the political fallout from Greece's economic crisis. Hardliners in the governing Syriza party have split and are forming their own independent movement within parliament. Well, it comes a day after Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras announced his resignation. And he called for snap elections. Well, opposition groups are now trying to unite to form a new government, but that's unlikely to happen, meaning Greece appears headed for its 5th national election in 6 years. Well, that's what Alexis Tsipras is hoping for. He's betting on an election win to boost his economic reform mandate. France 24's Catherine Clifford has more on reactions to the Prime Minister's political wager.
Another risky move for Alexis Tsipras. On Thursday evening, he arrived at the president's office to hand in his resignation. Addressing Greeks via their television screens, Tsipras said though he didn't get the anti-austerity debt agreement he'd promised to push for in his election campaign, he believes the existing deal was the best anyone could have achieved. Now that the mandate he was elected on back in January has been pushed to its limit, he wants his people's approval to press ahead with the new programme of tightened austerity. For some Greeks, though, it's too soon for yet more political uncertainty.
It's not what's best for our country. Having frequent elections has a cost.
The people decided 8 months ago. The referendum took place about a month and a half ago. I think it's premature.
On the other hand, an initial encouraging reaction from within the European Commission. Chief of Staff to its head, Jean-Claude Juncker, said swift elections could be a way to broaden support for the programme just signed by Tsipras on Greece's behalf. When voting for the new rescue deal, 43 of Syriza's 149 MPs either rebelled or abstained, meaning Tsipras had to rely on the opposition for support. If re-elected, he'd be able to come back with a stronger hand, pushing out the rebellion within his party.
It's not the best decision for the government, but you know that politics come first, and Tsipras wanted to solidify, to re-emerge as the leader of the centre, left and the left as well.
It may be a gamble, but Tsipras remains popular. The last poll to be published in July put support for Syriza at over 33%, making it by far the most popular party.
Well, earlier I spoke with France 24's Natalie Savaricas in Athens for more on the political shakeup.
The leadership of the former energy minister, hardliner Panagiotis Lafazanis, overall 25 MPs from Syriza have broken away from the party and have formed a new movement. It's called Popular Unity. Now we're waiting for the last bureaucratic details to be sorted out before they can actually call themselves a party. When they do so, they're actually the 3rd strongest in parliament, so it actually means that Panagiotis Lafazanis will actually receive the mandate from the president once the conservative leader of New Democracy, the second opposition party, fails to form a coalition government in the coming days. And that is the likeliest scenario at the moment, unless, we have some surprising developments, which are quite unlikely. So huge news today, which are bad news and a huge headache for Alexis Tsipras, but not one that was very surprising. It was imminent, it was in the cards, and it was widely expected as well.
So does this impact then what we could see as a possible election this coming September?
Absolutely. And interestingly, all the bets were on the 20th of September, but there have been few surprises like this one, the new announcement of the party, or even as Vangelis Memarakis, the leader of a New Democracy, the opposition party, accepting the challenge of trying to form a coalition government. All this is delaying the proceedings for Alexis Tsipras. So, the elections could happen either late September, later than the 20th, as originally planned, and even early October. But yes, elections very much inevitable, and all scenarios now point to a caretaker government led by the president, one of the presidents of the Supreme Court. Likeliest we'll probably see actually the first female prime minister of Greece being shortly appointed to lead the government to elections at the end of the month or early next of October.
That was Natalie Savarakis reporting there from the Greek capital. Well, the country faces an economic crisis, but Greece is also facing a migrant crisis. Now, a record number of people are arriving on Greece's shores every day. The influx has prompted Greece's neighbor, Macedonia, to declare a state of emergency. Well, there are reports of clashes this Friday as police stand off with about 1,500 migrants and refugees trying to cross into Macedonia. The border between the two countries, it's become a funneling point for tens of thousands of people trying to find a better life in Europe. Well, meanwhile, Germany has criticized Europe's failure to handle the situation. The German Interior Minister repeated calls for a common European asylum policy, saying it's unacceptable that Berlin is shouldering the burden. Well, Germany currently takes around 40% of asylum seekers and is on course to receive a record 800,000 people this year alone. Well, NGOs and aid services are buckling under the pressure. Anne Maillet and Julian Klin report from Berlin.
300 to 600 immigrants arrive here every day. This center in Berlin is where they make their claim for asylum. For many of them, it is the final destination of a long journey to what they see as an El Dorado, Germany.
The people say that Germany they want to have a refugee in their country, and they give house and they give everything, and therefore we came to Germany.
It's Germany, refugees, very good. Baby, family, good.
But reality is more complicated than this. Germany is struggling to cope with a massive influx. Support for the refugees is improvised rather than organized, like at this home for asylum seekers, where it takes local residents to bring food and to play with the children.
We see what's happening with these kids, and it's shocking. We can't just leave them in the streets like that.
Many of these volunteers believe that the authorities are not really doing everything they can to make the refugees' arrival as easy as possible.
I'm not sure that the government really is overwhelmed. It's a matter of will. They're probably just afraid that still more refugees will try to come here.
The government itself is calling for its European neighbors' help. Berlin believes that the refugee crisis requires a strong and common strategy.
Germany won't be able, in the long run, to welcome and shoulder 40% of the refugees who come to Europe, as it has been doing.
Every day, more temporary homes are set up in Germany, yet these structures won't be enough to cope with the 800,000 refugees expected this year.
Well, our troops in North Korea are on high alert. President Kim Jong-un has warned of additional cross-border operations one day after both the North and the South traded fire. Well, Seoul says Pyongyang fired first on Thursday. This in retaliation for a loudspeaker campaign. Josh Vardy has the details.
A war over loudspeakers between North and South Korea. After 11 years of silence, the South has resumed broadcasting anti-Pyongyang messages aimed at the North Korean population from these banks of speakers. North Korean officials gave their neighbors 48 hours to remove them and fired projectiles in the direction of the offensive sounds. In response, the South launched dozens of shells into North Korean territory.
The President's orders were to respond decisively to the North's provocation in order to keep our military fully prepared and at the same time make sure our people are kept safe and protected.
South Korea has also evacuated civilians all along the frontier between the two countries, particularly at Yeoncheon, which is where the North fired projectiles at the speakers. South Korea says that around 2,000 civilians have been moved.
I was at home and I heard a few thumping sounds. A few minutes later, officials came onto the streets and told residents to evacuate to the town shelters. People who had cars took those who were having trouble, along with elderly residents, and we all gathered at the shelter.
Tensions between the two countries have been building since the beginning of the month. This week, South Korea carried out a joint training exercise with the US, with the aim of preparing for a possible nuclear attack from the north.
The investigation into this week's deadly bombing in Bangkok appears to be stalled. Thai authorities have tripled a reward to $85,000 for information leading to the arrest of the main suspect. Well, 20 people died in Monday's blast in the country's worst ever bombing. Speaking at a memorial for the dead, National Police Chief said the attack was an attempt to stoke fear and uncertainty in the capital, but he gave no hint of progress. This as police struggle with false leads and contradictory statements.
From suspected terrorists to innocent bystanders, Thai police were searching for 3 suspects in Monday's bombing at a Bangkok shrine. The man in the yellow shirt taking off his backpack and the 2 men on the right. Thai officials thought they were accomplices, but late Thursday they said they'd been following false leads.
A man in a red shirt was a Thai who met with police today, while a man in a white shirt was a Chinese citizen who left yesterday. From our primary investigation, they were not likely to be involved.
The Thai tour guide and Chinese tourist were cleared of all suspicion, and authorities have now asked for help from Interpol to identify the main suspect. Authorities believe he is fair-skinned and is likely a foreigner, but at the same time, they said the bombing was not an act of international terrorism.
Our security forces have collaborated with intelligence agencies from a lot of countries. We have come to the same preliminary conclusion that the incident is unlikely to be linked to international terrorism.
Reassuring Chinese visitors is of the utmost importance for Thailand's tourism-dependent economy. Half of the tourists killed in Monday's bombing were from China, the #1 source of tourism for Thailand. No group has come forward claiming responsibility. And on Friday, Thai officials downplayed previous comments that a network of 10 people were involved. They now say just that the suspect must have had some help. After days of contradictory statements, the police chief has now told his subordinates not to speak to the media.
Well, now there appears to be no end in sight to the forest fires raging across the western United States. Well, 5 states have been affected and thousands of people forced to leave their homes. Oliver Ferry has the story.
The immense walls of fire continue apace, eating away at the forests of the US West Coast. The landscape at times looks apocalyptic. It has been a black summer for forest fires in the region. 20,000 kilometres squared of forest have been destroyed, an area similar in size to Wales. Thousands of people have fled their homes to escape impending disaster.
And so we were basically on alert, and that was about 1:30, and then at 4 o'clock they just said leave. Like leave right now.
I just don't know. I'm hoping when we go back our house is still there.
On the ground, dozens of firefighters battle to contain the blaze. The flames claimed the lives of 3 of them on Wednesday. The Army too has been drafted in as backup, like here in Washington State.
Basically what we come out here to do is help with the locals, keep their from their buildings or houses catching on fire, and just try to make sure that we keep the fire under control as much as we can.
Long dry spells this summer have made the fires particularly strong, and recent heat waves have compounded it further. The total cost of the fires could yet run into billions of dollars.
Well, this probably comes as no surprise to those affected by those U.S. fires, but across the planet, the mercury is on the rise. New data shows the first 7 months of this year were the hottest ever recorded. And the month of July was the one that topped them all. Well, it's even more confirmation that the effects of global warming are speeding up. Solange Mougin has more.
Packed fountains in Italy, hordes of people in swimming pools in Germany, in bathing suits or fully dressed like here in Pakistan. Countries across the globe were feeling the heat this past July. It was the hottest month ever recorded. Almost all regions, north and south, saw above average temperatures. In some places, as much as 5 degrees hotter than normal. All too common cases of scorching heat, like in eastern France, where the effects of global warming are visible. Here, the Mont Blanc's glaciers have lost 10 meters of ice over the past decade.
This year, we've seen over 100 rock slides. In the coming weeks, it is certain we won't see as many, but they're likely to be bigger.
2015 is slated to be the hottest year since weather recordings began in 1880. It would top the current record holder last year.
I'm Molly Hall in Paris. You're watching France 24.
For some Afghans, the departure of NATO troops last December meant liberation. For others, it signaled difficult times ahead, especially for those